Hey guys, David here. So I got a lot of questions about, hey, I see you're fixing a bunch of batteries. I would love to fix my own battery. Um, how would I go about doing that myself? Or getting comments like, oh, hey, you should really share about like your process so that other people that can't afford your services can go ahead and learn for themselves. And for the longest time, I've held off on doing that because, well, I'm like, hey, there is the GitHub that's publicly available. I don't really have any proprietary information, but I also realize that a GitHub isn't necessarily the most user-friendly uh, way of going about it because you're really like you're capturing all the information in snapshots, and I guess from that it's I've been there where following the GitHubs like there's a whole lot of ambiguity, so that's what this video is for. So I'm gonna try the best I can to talk through the commentary as I sip on my water, and I just go and talk over the footage that I shot over me fixing this XR battery. So here, obviously, I'm removing the screws. This is probably the easiest part of the process, and chances are, if you tried cracking open your XR battery, you probably got this far. So let me walk through the general procedure off the top of my head. So the main goal is to open it up so that you can measure the voltages. And if all the voltages are pretty much good, I will define what that kind of means later. Then I can go ahead and flash it. And what that means is that I'm basically wiping its memory because uh, the battery thinks that something went wrong, and so an error is put inside the memory. And so long as that error is still there, no matter if the cells are in proper condition or not, it will still give you red light of death. And so the purpose of opening it up and wiping its memory is so that you're basically doing a hard factory reset to the memory module so that it doesn't remember that anything bad ever happened, so it just starts working normally again. At least that is the theory. And so here are the general phases. Like phase one is me just opening up the thing physically. It's doing a lot of mechanical persuasion. Phase two is me measuring the voltages to see if they're all proper or not. If they're not proper, I need to charge them up manually. I don't actually do that in this clip because, well, I suspected before I even did this fix that all the voltages must have been normal. And then phase four is me doing the flashing, and then phase five is testing. I'll talk a little bit about the materials that are required for this. Obviously, you need some sort of prying tools. I highly recommend gloves like I'm wearing right now because I have cut myself opening up these batteries. Not by me stabbing myself with a screwdriver, although that is possible and you will see me do that later on. But you need gloves because the battery is actually a lot sharper than you might think it is because like the edges where it meets the board, it's a very, very sharp angle, and it's deceptively sharp where it doesn't seem very sharp because it's plastic, but like the second you rub your fingers all over it, it just like it's a bloody mess. um, I kind of cringe kind of thinking about it. So get some gloves, get some very sturdy screwdrivers because you will need it not only for this part but for actually getting the things out, as I will describe later. You will also need a soldering iron with a reasonably skinny tip. I'm not going to say that you need a specific kind of soldering iron as long as you have a way to manually adjust the temperature. I am using a TS 100 with a Hako bent conical tip. You will definitely need some very, very thin wires and what's called an FT232H. basically whatever is on the bill of materials on the GitHub, you will absolutely need. I'm going to say a couple of extra things that I tend to do in my repairs to make my job a little bit easier. Obviously, you should wear a mask because the fumes are pretty dangerous. But yeah, as long as you are being safe, I don't think that you will catch your house on fire, is what I'm trying to say. So yeah, I haven't been talking about a whole lot about the what I'm doing on screen right now, so I'll go ahead and do that. So I am running the screwdriver gradually up and down the gasket because it uses a silicone that forms a gasket on the in the battery, and so it is very, very difficult to persuade in a way that doesn't end up cracking the back plastic, because if you do it too quickly, you'll actually form cracks in it. I did that in a couple of batteries, and I was like, it's still functional. Um, but I had to do some extra work to make sure it was sealed later. I obviously don't recommend riding in the rain after doing this modification. I'm a guy who loves riding in the rain. Not necessarily loves, but like I'll do it if I have to. But I wouldn't take out one of these batteries and do it unless I had um, the original adhesive. I do put in aquarium adhesive afterwards, but I'm honestly haven't done a water submersion test or anything like that. I might do that in a future video just for the heck of it and just see what happens. So what I'm doing right now is that I'm trying to apply pressure on both sides evenly so I can lift up the entire lid at once. And you just had to do it a few times. I think I did it like 6 times total, 3 on each side. And it just takes a while. And the more patient you are with it, the better chance of success that you'll have. And yeah, here you go right here. I was able to pull that off, and now I'm just like leveraging that up because there's a little bit of adhesive towards the top where you can't see because my camera struggled to focus. And then you can pull it to the side. There's enough cable slack in order for you to do that. I was able to do that for pretty much every single one. I've never come across one where the cables were a little bit too short, and I wasn't able to do that, because that way I can have easier access to the battery tabs over there. So let me explain what's happening over here, because the first time I did this, I was completely sketched out. Um, so I am sticking a flathead screwdriver around half an inch in the middle of the cell. And now, if you know anything about lithium ion cells, like you can't, like your first instinct is to not put anything near it. So there's a video on YouTube where it shows like the guy, he does the exact opposite of what I do. He puts it in between the cells, but that is actually more dangerous because the terminals are that they're exposed terminals that are easily accessible if you stick a screwdriver far enough so that you can potentially short circuit the entire battery and cause a fire. But whereas if you actually push in between the terminals, like in the middle of the cell, you're not actually pushing up against a cell, you're actually pushing up against metal. Obviously you can't see that because of, well, if you never opened up a battery before, you don't really know. But believe me, like the anatomy of it is that like I am pushing up against metal, so I am confident that where my screwdriver is, that I am not going to be damaging anything. Yeah, and there. I was able to get it loose enough to the point that I could just use my fingers to like pry it out like that. And there you go. You can see like those black bits those are not plastic. Those are actually those three things are heat sinks. And as you can see over here, I turned it on just to confirm it does actually have red lead of death. right here, I'm writing down all the voltage numbers. I guess I will put that up on screen in post because I forgot to screen record that part. Um, Basically, what I found out by measuring, so I measured the 6 along the outer edge. So there's 3 on one side, 3 on the other. Those are cells 1, 2, and 3, 11, 12, and 13. And then I go back and do 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. It's just faster that way because that way I can get like an initial diagnosis of, okay, these 6 cells, they're all good. Then I can go check the inner ones. If the 3 cells, like if the 6 cells on the outside, if one of them is bad, then like there's not really that much of a point to do the inner ones because I had to. That's the point where I had to give some bad news and say, hey, um, this battery is going to take me a lot longer to fix if you want me to fix it because I had to go and replace some cells, and like that's kind of where I needed like just that's where I need to like stop and say, hey, I can't fix this unless I have your go ahead to do this procedure because it costs me more time and therefore costs you more money. Um, that's a whole different business thing. This battery was sent to me after somebody very recently went on their Boosted Mini X and it just appeared while riding, which sounds pretty normal. The guy, he uh, he his charging habits is that he would plug it in and then as soon as it reached 100 he would unplug it, and that sounds like good battery practice, and most of the time that is. Unfortunately, for boosted batteries they start balancing at 100% on older firmware versions. For newer firmware versions 100% is truly 100%. With this specific firmware it does not do that, and the reason why I know that it's that firmware is because, one, he bought it fairly recently, pretty new, and which indicates me that if it was completely new, then if it was sold as new in box within the last, I don't know, 6 to 8 months, then the firmware on it likely never had the opportunity to become upgraded because Boosted shut down in March, and so at no point in the owners or the previous owners time of ownership, they would ever have the opportunity to update the firmware. So the default firmware is 2.1.7, and if those numbers mean nothing to you, basically that it's like if you're it's like your iPhone running iOS 12 when you first pull it out of the box when we're on iOS 14, and so like he obviously he needed to update the firmware but he couldn't because Boosted went out of business, so it's just running the old firmware. Where like if you're running iOS 12 it's not the end of the world, but let's say there was something that was like that would just brick the iPhone exclusively in iOS 12 that they fixed later on in iOS 14. Well, obviously you want to update to iOS 14 but you can't because in this alternate reality Apple went out of business. Well, Boosted went out of business, so you can't upgrade to the newest firmware if the company can no longer afford to keep the firmware up in the servers. So that is why I know that the battery is an older firmware. He unplugged it as soon as it reaches 100, which means the battery isn't truly at 100% because it needs to balance. And if it doesn't balance, so the reason why let me back up for a second first. The reason why it will turn green and say it's 100% is because that one of the cells, only one of them, has reached 3.92 volts, which is a theoretical maximum voltage. And so the battery management system has to will report it as fully charged even though that only one of the cells has reached 3.92 volts, which means that the rest of the 12 the battery cells, uh, pretty much none of them have reached that high yet. So one could be 3.90, one could be 3.80, one could be 3.70. You are allowed a 0.5 voltage difference. So it's for it to be properly operational. And so even though it says 100%, one of the cells could be at 3.92 volts and the other cell could be at 3.5, gosh, math is hard, 3.42 volts. and that would like that's a crazy difference, but it would still report as 100% because one of the battery cells reached that 3.92 volt threshold. I know it's a little weird, which is why they fixed that in a future firmware upgrade. But again, you can't download the future firmware upgrade because Boosted went out of business. And so the reason why it's problematic that he unplugged it when like the second it reached 100% is because it hasn't had that time to bring that those cells that are lower, the ones that are potentially at 3.42 volts, up to 3.92 volts. So when he went and rode, some cells are lower than others, and some cells are higher than others. And when you drain it, the lowest cell will have these cells have a non-linear discharge curve and will discharge more the more the emptier they are. And so when the cell that's the most charged discharges a little bit, the cell that has the most amount discharged would discharge the most. And so all of a sudden the voltage difference between the highest charged cell and the lowest charged cell is amplified even more, and that is what causes red light of death to appear. And I suspect that is exactly what happened. The reason why I believe I didn't need to recharge that one specific cell is because when you just kind of full throttle it, that is typically when you get red light of death. And the thing is, when you full throttle it, the voltages will drop, but they typically will bounce back a little bit, and that's what I suspect happened. I wasn't completely certain, which is why I had to measure it. I've been done measuring it for a few minutes now, but a few minutes ago I was measuring all the voltages to make extra sure that the voltages were within the acceptable range, meaning that I measure all 13 cells. If none of the cells were off by more than half a volt, then I know I can go straight ahead to wiping the memory, which is what I'm trying to do right now. I'm scraping away at what's called conformal coating. It's basically just plastic that's protecting the PCB from water and things like that. PCB, printed circuit board, BMS, it's like those are pretty much interchangeable in this situation. And so I am getting rid of the conformal coating so I can get some wires onto that flash memory. It's called an SPI flash memory. It's not really super important that you know what these things are called. It's just memory. I guess I should note that I'm not an electrical engineer. I learned literally all of this from Jonathan Albert, so shout out to him. I'm going to use a lot of surgery references here. I think it's because I mean, I find Grey's Anatomy somewhat entertaining. I don't really find it that much entertaining now, but I found it entertaining a couple of years ago, and I was also into like human anatomy. I loved human anatomy lab, just like going around in cadaver lab, learning about all the different anatomical regions. That was awesome. And so I think that's kind of why I call myself the battery surgeon, because it makes up for the fact that I can't actually be a medical surgeon, but hey, I'm fixing people's batteries. This is a tangent, but I hope you enjoy it because this is the voiceover. And so, and what I'm doing over here is really important. I am covering up all of the terminals with electrical tape so that if one of the wires that I'm soldering accidentally touches the battery, I don't end up sending a bunch of voltage through that PCB, because that PCB is obviously not designed to handle that voltage straight from the battery, because it has all this protection circuitry and like boost converter, buck converter thing, and I'm basically bypassing all that all the complex circuitry if one of the wires accidentally touches it, and I will end up frying it, that actually did happen one time. So I was like, all right, never again. It is just not worth saving 5 seconds. So let me just put some electrical tape on the terminals, and call it a day. And like that way, I know I'm extra safe from catastrophic short circuits like that. What was it saying? Gosh, these are the joys of me trying to commentate video in real time. Oh, yes, soldering wires to it. So I need to solder 4 wires to the flash memory module and 2 wires to the, it's called a JTAG port. And this one is not the program port, it's the other port. I forget the name off the top of my head. Here's the PCB on screen, and I'm basically just putting 2 wires there so I can deactivate the processor. It's called an MCU. It's pretty much a CPU, if you want to think about it in that way. It's the brain of the BMS PCB thing. And the reason why I have to deactivate it is because I need to be able to send signals to it, and I also need to be able to ground all those signals. And the ground is located at that specific port. And so I need to solder 6 wires to it, and then attach an EEPROM reader writer. It's an FT232H. Again, all of these materials are on the GitHub, published by Jonathan Albert, and I highly encourage that you reread that thing multiple times. Even though I'm walking through this right now, reading that thing multiple times is gonna give you all the right stuff to buy, and he has very helpful links for like the right stuff to buy and things like that. So I would, if you want the best chance of success, just buy all the stuff that is on that are on the links, and because that's exactly what I did, and I haven't had a single one go wrong because of it. I have had some go wrong because of idiot things that I've done, but never because of what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that, yes, follow the tutorial. Follow the tutorial and do some extra things like insulate the battery terminals, because you don't want to be an idiot like me and send like 40 plus volts through the MCU and frying the damn thing. Yeah. So right now I am putting a little bit of solder on the end of all of the small wires. So there are 4 wires total. I have 2 black and 2 white. I guess I may have dropped a wire earlier, so that's why you see me like just scramble for a second, try to pick one up. And it is the reason why I have 2 white and 2 black is because I have hot, cold as far as like colors go. So 2 of the wires are black and white, and the other 2 wires are red and blue. And so red is a hot color, blue is a cool color, black is a black color, white is a white color. So I kind of color coordinate without having to actually have all the different like colors, I guess, so I can just go ahead and solder. It's like hot, cold, it's cold, hot, hot, cold. I think in that sequence, if you go from like top to bottom, it's like cold, hot, hot, cold, and then I just kind of learned to memorize it. Don't worry about memorizing it. Like, you should absolutely like recheck your connections, double check it, triple check it. Like, just like absolutely, it's a measure thrice, cut once sort of deal. Nothing bad will happen because I have screwed it up. I have screwed up the wiring before. Nothing bad has happened because I guess the EEPROM reader writer, the FT232H, like it's smart enough not to like send a bunch of voltage to wherever within reason. If you're an idiot about it, of course you'll probably screw something up. But hey, I'm kind of an idiot about it. I pretty much managed to screw up in almost every single way possible, and I haven't. At least for the first battery, nothing bad happened to it. The third battery, okay, it's a different story, but that's a story for another time. So right now I am checking for continuity. I don't do this every single time, but I did it for this one because I noticed that the leads were very, very close to one another. So I just wanted to be extra sure. Again, nothing bad should happen, but like that costs me time if I find out way too late that, oh, hey, these two wires are touching even though they don't look like they're touching. I got to go resolder that. Like I just would rather know that before I do the hard work of attaching the EEPROM reader writer than, after. Okay, sweet. I just got it hooked up and I am pulling up all of the flash ROM commands. Uh, I have a MacBook Pro 2019 with Touch Bar, so I pretty much was able to program all of the necessary commands that I needed in there. So I sent a test command only to the FT232H. Do not attach any of the wires yet to the battery. The reason for that is because, especially if you like just bought your FT232H out of the box, it needs to like configure the correct voltage logic. And so if you use 5-volt logic instead of 3.3-volt logic, you will fry your memory module. So that would not be fun. Uh, so now I am plugging in all of the appropriate ones. So I used very rigid wiring for the probes over there. I kind of like that, strangely enough, because that way I can like position it so that wherever the wires sticking out are, like wherever they kind of bend, I can meet them there, and so that way I don't apply a lot of tension and pressure to it. I'm pretty sure there is a better way of going about it, but I found that to work. So, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And so after I attach all the wires, I'm going to run the same test command again. Again, all these commands can be found on the GitHub. I'm not sure how many times I've said that now. It's on the GitHub. I know you're here because you're like, hey, the GitHub looks too complicated, and I'm telling you, you got to follow the GitHub. I'm sorry, that's just the way that's just how it works. I'm not really sure what to say beyond that. Uh, I hope that this does demystify a lot of the process. And so, okay, what I'm doing here is I'm using a plastic spudger so I can like kind of separate one from the other so I can get a more proper contact. Again, trying not to apply pressure to the wire itself, because if I do, there's a chance that it'll pop out. And one time I had the wire pop out in the middle of the erase procedure, and it still worked. It still worked fine. It's like, crap. You just don't want that sort of thing happening midway. Um, as I was saying, you got to follow the GitHub. Like the GitHub is a thing that where a lot of that's pretty much where all my knowledge came from for how to do this procedure. And follow it for the first, like, if you only have one battery, then yeah, of course it's going to be super stressful because this is your only battery. You don't want to screw it up. And I'm telling you that, hey, as long as you follow the procedure and you avoid some stupid mistakes, some of which I already pointed out that I've done in prior repairs that caused me to brick the entire battery. As long as you don't do any of those things, you'll be fine. So here I'm going to show you the commands I'm running. Again, same commands that you will find on the GitHub. And so I did this is the reading the flash command, and now I am verifying the flash. Yeah, I'm hitting the verify flash thing right now. There we go. It says verified, so I can go ahead and do the erase command. And this is a 10-minute procedure. I'm assuming that most people don't have the patience to wait around 10 minutes, and neither do I. So I went ahead and watched some Sarah Dici in the meantime. And if you want to sit around for 10 minutes, go ahead. Um, yeah, I mean, it was successful afterwards. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut this bit of the video. All right. Yeah, sweet. I cut. Okay, so you didn't see it on the screen, but it said erase write done over there. And so there's one command, there's like one last command I needed to write until I was able to release the push button according to the GitHub. And so I am gingerly removing the wires. So I think I removed the blue wire first. No, the order doesn't really matter. Just remove the ground wire last, and then you unsolder the FT232H, and then you turn on the battery. Well, in my case, I plug in the battery to see if it works. Yeah. And I just cleaned up the solder pads over there just so that I make extra sure that none of them are shorting each other, because I want the thing to turn on now, and if I short it, then it's not going to turn on. All right, and then in 3, 2, 1, and we got a charging battery. Yeah, that felt good. Especially since this entire thing took like less than 40 minutes total. Like it was a good day. It was a good day. Well, guys, thanks so much for watching, and I hope that you learned a little bit more of how this procedure works. If you want to if you want to get the materials to do this on your own, again, go to the GitHub. If you want to not catch your house on fire, go to the GitHub. Go to the GitHub. All right. See you guys.